Let me jump into the Q&A, and Susan or Enid, are there signs in children that should alert parents that their child is being exploited? Susan, would you answer that?
Sure. I mean, there's some general signs around trauma, in general. So one thing I would say is, this is not, online exploitation is not completely different. It is a form of trauma. And so anything you would normally look for around, kids who may be experiencing trauma, changes in behavior, withdrawal from favorite activities, withdrawal from family and friends, like all of those things could be a sign of trauma and could be a sign of online exploitation. And the trick is asking enough questions and broad enough questions and thinking about their online life. So not just is something happening, you may ask something happening at home, is something happening at school, and then think about how are things going online? Have you had any, uncomfortable or anything happening with you, with people who are talking to you online? I've noticed this behavior change, could it be something like that? I would say for computers and online stuff, specifically, things like, turning off the device as soon as you walk over or shutting the computer off. One of the things we hear from survivors too is in the course of their sextortion, they're sometimes told to send imagery at certain times or to be on camera at certain times. So that would be something specific to that online exploitation that I would point out is, if they're like, I don't want to go out to dinner right after school, I need to get home, I need to be online. Why do you need to be online at this specific time? Why do you have to be on your phone, focusing on talking to people immediately after school? Because that could be a sign that someone is, threatening them about being available online. It's tricky because kids, as they get older, they need and want privacy. So I don't want to say the fact that they don't want you over their shoulder their time is a sign of trauma. A lot of that is a sign of being a teenager, right? But, a lot of secrecy or that compulsiveness and just really reactive signs to being questioned about their online life. Those kinds of things maybe could be a clue that it's something online. And of course, I know you guys talk a lot about trafficking and there are different signs of that, but those would be the things I'd point out in terms of the online exploitation piece maybe being an issue.
Thank you. Professor Bozic, as someone looking to pursue a career in fighting human trafficking, what is some advice you want to pass on?
I think the first thing is to find an organization that you can partner with. So for example, the Global Women's Center for Women in Justice, they have an excellent program to really get your information and really understanding what it takes. And it depends on what you want to seek in that area. Do you want to pursue the legalities? Do you want to be an advocate? Do you want to be a lobbyist? Do you want to be a social media manager? So it depends on what career and direction you want to head in. But really partnering with organizations, if you're younger, definitely seek those internships. The more internships and experience that you have and you're exposed, then that's really going to cultivate the direction that you can head towards.
Great. I want to jump in just for a second and tell you, even if you're not young and you want to become better educated on human trafficking in whatever your current role is, you should take a look at our anti-human trafficking certificate program right here that Deputy Chief Marsh oversees here at Vanguard. Thank you. And back to you, Susan. How is NCMEC preparing to respond to AI-generated images? Who's responsible for examining and determining if the image is AI? Whoa.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that whoa. I would say that's a question, and if someone wants to get in touch with me, I'm happy to put you in touch with the folks who do the cyber tip line stuff. I know that's a big issue. We've been convening meetings and talking with the Department of Justice and federal law enforcement. I think that's something I'm not fully prepared to talk about here in this setting, but it's definitely something that we're very aware of, and again, trying to be really collaborative with industry, with law enforcement, figuring that out. But that will be something that's obviously going to affect our cyber tip line reports and going to affect our law enforcement partners trying to figure out where there are kids that need help and what kind of response we need, and proving when people are responsible for creating, circulating, possessing those abusive imagery. So that's a huge, huge challenge coming. I've been more involved on the prevention messaging side, which Tina will be able to touch on tomorrow. But I think mainly a whoa, and if you are someone in that investigative field who wants some details on that, I'm happy to put you in touch with our operational folks for more information.
So you offered to put people in touch. How do we contact you?
The easiest way is actually on outreach@mcmic.org. That'll go to my team. You'll get a faster response. So if you're looking for, depending on what your question is, but if it's that, they can get you in touch with me. Or you guys have, I trust you can give out my email address too, but that outreach one is very easy to find and remember.
And again, if you're on Sketch, you can go to the directory to get more information too. All of her information is there. Okay, tough question. Do you have any response to forward-looking as we address AI?
I think as we look to the future, the number one thing is try not to post images of your children that are accessible to the public space. I know that's hard to say, especially there are influencers out there that are posting images of their children. Unfortunately, all those images are possibilities of turning into something absolutely horrific. Have those conversations with your children. Resist posting everything everywhere all at once. Remove the location service on your phones because that's one way that they can find your children. Try not to put information out there about yourself. Even if you have private accounts like Instagram, for example, that doesn't necessarily prevent those who want to distort those images from accessing those images. Because if you have the location service open on your Instagram, they're still going to be able to find those images through the location. So really think through about what kind of images you want to share. I know we have family members that we want to share those images with to know how our children are doing, but you might want to look into something that's a little bit more private than on Meta, which includes Facebook and Instagram. TikTok, absolutely no. There's so many reasons as to why. And if you knew what was happening in the online gaming world, Roblox, for example, I highly recommend not having any children on there. Over 29 million users are under the age of 13, and there is no parental involvement or permission needed to be on Roblox. You're basically exposing your child to any predator that's out there, and they know that Roblox is the space to do it. So become educated and know, the limitations of what you should share about your children and yourself.
Another whoa. Okay. What about, we know in human trafficking, familial trafficking is a thing. And now we're beginning to see parent-generated content. Any New York Times article last week, a marketplace of girl influencers managed by moms and stalked by men. Either of you care to comment on that? Parent-generated content.
I can throw out a little bit. I haven't seen that article, but I would just say that when we look at our data over, the cyber plan has been operating since early 2001. Very shortly after that, we formed something called the Child Victim Identification Program. I mentioned as a way to organize imagery and stuff. Over the time, we've consistently seen that a lot of the CSAM reported to us is intrafamilial sex abuse. Their parents abusing kids, their family members abusing kids, and they're filming and uploading it online. So I think, again, we tend to have this kind of artificial separation in the CSAM online, child sexual abuse. It is child sexual abuse that's put on the internet. And sadly, just as we know in the child sexual abuse world, the people most likely to harm kids are people who have access to them, people in their circle of trust. So it's not surprising, this idea of parental generated child sexual abuse material, that's kind of always been a thing, unfortunately. And then you're making this interesting linkage, I think, with familial trafficking, which I think we have not always paid a lot of attention to, and we definitely should. And just in the same way you see, unfortunately, parents trafficking their kids, you do see kids being exploited by their caregivers in terms of selling imagery, asking them to perform sexual acts online. All of that sadly has always been a part of it, has always been a pretty big part of it. We actually find in our analysis of actively traded imagery, about 50-60% of it has always been created by people who have real life circle of trust access to kids. So that's not wholly a new trend. So it's just something for us to be aware of the intervention and prevention things we think about for child sexual abuse, where we know 90% of kids are abused by someone they know and trust, and really is about focusing on intrafamilial abuse. Same thing with CSAM. We've still got to have that same lens on for the types of ways that kids are victimized online as well.
I just wanted to add one more thing onto that is when a child is exposed, maybe on Roblox, there's rape incidents that are happening in that space where characters are enacting that, they're being exposed. So what we're seeing, there are cases now rising where children are exposed, they're now enacting that on their own siblings. And so it's just the cycle of abuse just continues. So it's very, very important to understand that if a parent's trafficking, children could enter that realm eventually if they're exposed to the images and they're doing it to their own siblings and they're not caught, and then they too can do it, and they don't understand, they don't have the maturity to understand what's actually happening, right? And if they're not having conversations with parents or caregivers or teachers, they're really not going to know if what they're doing is something they should stop doing. So it's really important. I mean, I know of a case where, a young girl who was on Roblox, she was 8, and there was a predator who disguised as a child and asked her for hot videos. She didn't understand. This is an umbrella, a helicopter parent. She has all the parental controls. She's sitting next to her. And this is going on, but because she had a good relationship with her 8-year-old, she then turned to her mom and said, I've sent all these videos to my friend, but he keeps asking for hot videos. I don't know what to do, Mommy. And then, of course, her mom freaks out, and now there's a civil lawsuit against Roblox with 8 other families. So these are a lot of really hard facts and incidents that's really hard to swallow, but again, as I mentioned before, we all need to do our part. I've just heard critique after critique against parents. Why aren't you, overseeing what your kids are doing? Why are you exposing them? Why are they this, da da da? Parents are busy, they're tired, they're probably unaware. If you have single moms especially, they have no idea what's going on. And so sometimes they're turning to these devices to help bring a little relief. And it's not fair to really think that this is an issue only parents need to resolve. This is everyone, all hands on deck in every aspect.
I love that, because our last plenary today is about our community in prevention. Are you guys okay with taking 5 more minutes for Q&A before you get to go eat your lunch? Are you okay, Susan, if we ask just a couple more questions? Okay. Where can we find a list of most popular youth websites that are being targeted for these crimes?
As I mentioned, Protect Young Eyes, they're really good at staying on top of what's happening. They have reports on Roblox, they have reports on Minecraft. Minecraft isn't, if there was one area, Minecraft has more controls in it to prevent some of this stuff, but they're gonna figure out a way to get through. But if you go to Protect Young Eyes, they actually have a list of what's happening on Instagram and DMs. They have a list of what's happening in TikTok. They have a list of what's happening in every space that's out there. So definitely, you can find them on Instagram at Protect Young Eyes.
All right. And is NCMEC pushing for new laws that AI-generated naked child minor content would be punished as pornography?
I don't know about that issue specifically. I can point you, we are, the Earn It Act you talked about earlier, we are big supporters of that. We've got 5 different bills that were sort of the subject of that January 31st hearing that we're certainly in favor and advocating for. I'd have to get back to you about what the nexus with AI is on those or other legislation that we would support.
I wanted to add to that, if you are in a situation and you need legal assistance, you've tried to have images, videos removed, and you're not getting anywhere on these platforms, definitely seek counsel from NCOSE. That's the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. They have a legal team who are very educated on this topic, and they are fighting this fight, and they will put you in touch with any other legal members maybe that you might need in your area, but they're a good first start.
What stats do we have on the LGBTQ plus community with sextortion? What is the most targeted population within the community? And I know, Susan, you really pointed out the astronomical rise in boys being exploited. Could you answer that?
I would actually I mentioned Thorn is having some really good research, and they have a report they released last summer that's specifically about the experiences and vulnerabilities of LGBTQ youth, so I would point you to that. NCMEC doesn't have clear data on those cases that are reported to us, the sexual orientation or gender identity of those kids, so our NCMEC cyber tip line data wouldn't reflect those differences in communities. So, and I'm sure you have some other resources in the other NGOs that you've been talking about as well, but one report I went to is Thorn, and talking about there certainly ways that we see that population is vulnerable to many types of victimization. We also see that show up in the ways that they're interacting with folks online, and particularly for teens who, or kids who don't feel supported or accepted in their real life families, real life school communities. That's obviously going to create more of a need to be online and seeking support and information, and we can see some increased vulnerabilities for kids who are there are some great resources online for many of those kids. The connections they make and the resources they can access to the internet can be truly life-saving, but for some kids it can create additional vulnerabilities because there are people who can spot those vulnerabilities in kids who are seeking connection, information about sexual identity and sex and relationships. There can be some vulnerabilities there that are easy to exploit. So there's certainly a higher risk, but for the data, I definitely mentioned Thorn. You may have some other resources and research to mention as well.
Thank you so much. And another question that was asked is for examples of conversations where victims are extorted and lured. And I think I would like to point to NetSmarts as a great place to see those examples. As a parent, there are parent resources there, and there are resources that are age appropriate to show children. One of my favorite videos is It's Okay to Tell. And you can show that to a 6 or 7 year old, and it shows them what to do the first time pornography pops up on their screen. Can you give a great appreciation to both of our guests?